Welcome to this episode of Outside Fun, where I got lost in the woods. Lucky for you, my helmet cam was recording the whole thing. During the filming of the Log Cabin on a Budget series for this channel, the guys and I were headed into the bush to put in another day's work. While the guys drove to the build site on the tractor, I ran ahead on my dirt bike to do a loop around the bush to scout out some more potential trees for the construction of the cabin. Since I know this section of land fairly well, I was confident that I could navigate its labyrinth of trails easily enough. But this time, I decided to try the older trails, in search of better trees. The problem with the older trails is that most of them end up leading nowhere, and sometimes a natural corridor through the bush can look a lot like an old trail, even when it's not. I had obviously run out of trail at this point, but I knew that if I kept heading in the same direction, I was bound to come across one of the main trails. That was my first mistake. Normally, when I'm traveling through the bush, I always keep the trail in view, making sure not to stray too far away from it. But since I'm familiar with this area, I decided to ignore my instinct and plow through until I found the trail that I wanted to be on. Now, I'd say that there are 3 levels of disorientation when it comes to being lost in the woods, and knowing what level you are will help you form an appropriate strategy for getting out. To be at a level 1 means that you're slightly disoriented, and although you are unsure of your exact location, you are still able to confidently retrace your steps and get back to the path you were on. Remember, it's always better to retrace your steps back to a known path rather than trudging onward to find a path that might not exist. Level 2 means that you've gone far enough off the path to be disoriented, meaning that you are unsure of where you are, and you are unsure exactly where your original path is, but at least you are still aware of what direction the original path is in, and there's a decent chance you'll be able to retrace your steps to find it again. If you find yourself in this situation, make sure to stay calm so that you will be able to properly observe your surroundings. Resist the urge to panic and run, otherwise you might escalate your level of disorientation to a level 3. Level 3 is when you are hopelessly lost, meaning that you have absolutely no idea where you are, and you have no idea what direction you came from or what direction you were headed. The key is never to allow yourself to let the situation get this bad. Even for short hikes, it's always a good idea to carry food, matches, cell phone, compass, GPS, knife, tarp, rope, whistle, and warm clothes or blankets. It's also a very good idea to hike with a buddy, and always let a couple of friends or family members know where you are going and for how long. To avoid even getting to a level 1, you should always stay within view of the path when traveling through the bush. The denser the bush, the easier it is to be disoriented. I was once marking a path with ribbons through a particularly dense section of bush, and although I swore I was headed in a straight line, I kept looping back on my own path. I was very confused to see the ribbons that I had just set out behind me had seemed to mysteriously appear before me. But if your situation has gone from being slightly disoriented to hopelessly lost, there are things you can do to increase your chances of getting out of it. The generally accepted strategy for being lost is the acronym STOP, which stands for Stop, Think, Observe, and Plan. When you become lost, the first thing you need to do is just stop. At this point, your instincts will be making you want to run wildly in every direction. This, of course, will make things much worse. So you will have to force yourself to stop and sit down. Find a safe place, sit underneath the shade of a tree, have a snack and a drink of water, and relax. Allow your mind to override your instinct to aimlessly run. Now it's time to think. Think about landmarks that you should be seeing, or ways that you can retrace your steps. What direction were you headed? Do you remember seeing a map of the area? Is there a road you know that is to the east of you, or a river to the south, possibly a ridge to the north? Is there anything in your gear that can help you get your bearings, like a compass, a map, or a GPS? Does your cell phone have reception? The next step is to observe. You can start by listening. Do you hear a car in the distance? Do you hear a dog barking? Or maybe you might hear a nearby river. Is there a nearby tree or ridge that you can safely climb to get a better view? Do you see a hydro line somewhere? Look at the weather. Does it look like it might rain? You might want to find shelter to stay dry then. How many hours of sunlight do you have left? If it's nighttime, do you see the glow of city lights somewhere on the horizon? If you have any clues that might lead you in the right direction, do you have enough time before dark to find your way out? Otherwise, your best bet is to stay put and work on surviving the night. Your priority should be staying warm and staying dry. Do you have a tarp or jacket you can use to keep the rain and dew off? Maybe there's an overhang that you can get underneath. Stuffing your jacket and pants with dry leaves and grass will act as insulation. It'll be itchy, but at least it'll keep you warm. Do you have matches or a flint with you? If not, do you have a magnifying glass to concentrate the sunlight on some dried tinder? If you have glasses, the lenses might also work too. After you have found a way to combat hypothermia, your next focus should be on locating a water source. You can live 3 weeks without food, but you can only survive 3 days without water, so water is your next priority. The final step is to plan. Based on your observations and knowledge of the area, come up with several plans and act on one of them. Like I said before, you might decide that you have a good chance of finding your way out, and so you'll need to act upon that. But in many situations, the best plan will be to stay put, meaning you'll have to prepare for the night and also your eventual rescue. When people find themselves at a level 3, quite often the best option is to stay put and allow the rescuers to come find you. But make sure that you make it easy for them to find you. Is there a clearing nearby? Maybe you could spread some colorful rags on the ground to catch their attention. Do you have a mirror? You could flash it at a passing aircraft to get the pilot's attention. Or you could place something at the top of a tree. Green pine needles and green leaves on a fire can make a lot of smoke which can be seen on the horizon. When children become lost in the forest, they might know enough to stay put, but it's also a good idea to tell your kids not to hide from the rescuers who will be trying to find them, as some kids have been known to do. Teach them how to insulate their clothes. You can even make a game out of it. See who can stuff their jackets with the most leaves and grass. Give them a special whistle that they are to blow only when they are in trouble. If your child becomes lost, they'll be scared and will tend to wander. To keep them from being lonely and to help them stay put, tell them to find a friendly-looking tree if they become lost. Tell them to name it and to sit with their friend until help comes. And if they become scared, they can hug their friendly tree so that they'll feel safe. So anyway, I am now at a level 2, meaning that I am not sure of my exact location, but I'm still pretty confident of what direction my original path is in. Also, I am pretty sure what direction the guys will be in too. and so with my dirt bike clutch almost completely burnt out, I decided to follow the stop strategy. I turned off the bike and I caught my breath. I then thought about my situation. I knew that I was facing the west, which is where I knew the guys would be at the build site. I knew that I had come from the east. I also knew that about 3 kilometers north was an old country road, and that another service road was about 2 kilometers to the west. I also knew that I had my cell phone on me, along with some tools. I knew that if I walked to the west, there was a good chance I would be able to locate the build site, and if I happened to miss the site, I would eventually come across the road anyway. Now it was time for me to observe. It was still morning, and so I knew the sun was slightly to the east of me, which meant that I could use it to orientate myself if I lost my sense of direction. I looked at the trees around me and I considered climbing one of them to get a better view. But I decided against it. If I happened to fall out of the tree and knock myself unconscious, or worse, I knew that it would be impossible for the guys to find me. I listened for the sound of the tractor or the chainsaws, which the guys would have been using at the build site. But unfortunately, I didn't hear anything. However, I knew this could be a good sign. The guys should have gotten started by now, but the chainsaws were silent. I knew that I was probably close enough to hear a chainsaw if it was running at full throttle. This meant that the guys weren't working, probably because they realized I was in trouble and were probably listening for me, which they were. I didn't have a whistle on me, and so I decided to start shouting.
Hello! 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 Marco! Marco!
When I called out the first couple of times, my voice was so faint that only my brother thought he may have heard me, but he wasn't sure. After not receiving an answer to my first set of calls, I decided to try and drive my dirt bike further to the west. But eventually my clutch became completely burnt out from working so hard to get through the thick underbrush. My dirt bike was now undrivable. Again, I knew that I could probably find my way out on foot, but I also knew that if I left my dirt bike behind, there was a chance I might not have been able to find it again. And so I decided to stay put, knowing that the guys were somewhat nearby and would eventually come looking for me. I called out a second time.
Hello! Hello!
And this time the guys could faintly hear my voice, and so they started calling back. After we played a bit of Marco Polo, the guys found me and we were able to drag the dirt bike to the build site. To be fair, my situation wasn't all that bad, but that's only because I didn't let it get bad. The first rule is never allow yourself to even get to a level 1. But if you are level 1, there's no reason why you need to be a level 2. And if you're a level 2, there's no reason why you should be a level 3. And if you're hopelessly lost, there's no reason why you still can't be rescued or find your way out. All you have to do is never put yourself in a bad situation, always be prepared, and keep your wits about you. Nature is a beautiful gift from God that we can all enjoy, if we first learn to respect it. I presented you with a few essentials on what to do if you're lost, but I encourage you to educate yourself completely on the topic, as well as your children and others on what to do if they're lost. And better yet, teach yourself and others how not to get lost in the first place.